Welcome from
Perfect.
the IIBA Tampa Bay, Florida chapter. This is our Thursday evening study group. Today is November 16th, 2023. This is our 100th study group class. Welcome. Tonight we're going to be talking about the BABOK techniques, data modeling, and user stories. Our mission here at the IIBA Tampa Bay, Florida chapter is to bridge the gap between industry leaders and business analysts by building partnerships with professionals, educators, and employers so that we may empower, instruct, and engage the BA community. We have a worldwide audience, so if you're here in person, welcome. If you are watching by recording, reach out to us and let us know. It really helps us be motivated to continue. Incidentally, this is our Thursday evening study group, and we are here almost every Thursday night between 7 and 8 p.m. Eastern. However, this is our last one of 2023. We will begin again the first Thursday of 2024, so we'll see you there for the next one. We do have past meeting recordings, and we have an index of those past meeting recordings. We'll drop both of those into the chat. We have other ways for you to reach out to us through the IIBA site, Meetup, Zoom, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you want to reach out to us, LinkedIn is probably the best way to go. Watermark Learning has partnered with us. They have given us a discount code of 20% off of any of their products, which includes business analysis and other topics. Their discount code is Tampa-21, so you're welcome to use that. We are a volunteer-led organization. Cliff Gray is our president. You see him there in the Millennium Falcon. Yulia is our vice president of finance. Caitlin and Priscilla are board members at large. My name is Thea Soehren. I'm the vice president of career and professional development for the chapter. It's my job to answer your questions, provide training that you desire, and basically mentor. So if you have any questions, reach out to me through LinkedIn. We are looking for a few new board members. We have 3 people that have volunteered. We will be bringing them on in early 2024, and we are excited about their participation. If you would like to be a new board member, we can give you the amount of work or the amount of time that you have available and not overtax you. But what it does is it allows us to serve our community better using your skills and talents by either something that you're strong at or something that you want to practice. So reach out to me through LinkedIn. We have 2 study group advisors, Bob Churchill and Yulia. They have both earned their CBAP, and because they are, one of them at least, is attending, we are able to give you education credit for this hour. So thank you for y'all attending. I'm going to show you Bob's website in just a moment so you can see that. We have a lot of people that have earned their certifications, including Roshni. Congratulations, Roshni. And they have said that we at the study group here are part of their success. So we celebrate that. If we are part of your success, reach out to us and let us know that as well. Tonight, as I said, we're going to go over 2 techniques, data modeling and user stories. These are the last 2 techniques for the BABOK. We have gone through every single other of the 48 techniques that so far this year, and we've gone through them again previously in the previous year. All of those recordings are available to you, and let me show you where that's at. Let me move this down. Bob Churchill has created, well, that's not the one I wanted to show you. Bob Churchill has created this awesome website, rpchurchill.com, and if you go to Tampa IIBA Study Group, you'll get an index of all of the ways that you can reach us. Our Google Drive resource files are right here. Then here's a list of recordings of all of our study groups. And if you go all the way down to the bottom, there's a lot of work that's gone into this. Thank you, Bob. You have the list of techniques, and here's cycle 1, the previous cycle, and cycle 2 is the current cycle. And we are finishing this up now. If you click on this, you can actually watch the presentation for that technique. And further down, there's our guest series. These are our professionals that have been kind enough to come on and talk to us about their responsibilities in their roles that are tangent to business analysis. Business architecture is something I'm going to be mentioning tonight. Keith Nolan did a fantastic job talking about that, and we will move on from there. So let me get to the presentation. Here we are. So we're going to talk about data mapping. And I'm showing the wrong screen. Let's not do it that way. Data mapping. So I'm going to I will drop these links in the chat after I finish, but I want to tell you that some of this information comes from a webinar that I watched by Paula Bell, and she had guest Robert Thacker there. Robert Thacker is fantastic at data mapping. Not only am I going to show you what's in the BABOK, but I'm also going to show you some things that Robert showed us, some things I'm geeked out about, I'll be honest. So let's talk about what is in the BABOK.
Do you mean data modeling? There is no data mapping technique.
I apologize. You're right. It is called data modeling. So data modeling, according to the BABOK, let me move this over to this side. Maybe it'll be out of the way. Purpose is to describe the entities, classes, and data objects relative to a domain, the attributes that are used to describe them, and the relationships among them, to provide a common set of semantics for analysis and implementation. What does all that mean? I'm going to tell you. It's basically pictures that tell you what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to do it and who does what. And so it makes it a whole lot easier in the presentation I have following what's in the BABOK. Data models are frequently used in the elicitation of requirements, analysis, and design, as well as to support implementation and continuous improvement. So basically, you work with one person and they say, this is what we do, and you create your data map, and then you're able to take that picture to everyone else and say, is this really what we do? How do we need to refine this? Do we need to change this? And everyone could have the same understanding of the process. So there's a couple of variations of data models. There's conceptual data models, which are independent of any technology or solution, can be used to represent how the business perceives its information. This is from the business perception. It can be used to help establish the consistent vocabulary describing business information and the relationships within that information. So this is a pretty high level. The logical data model gets more refined. Its abstraction of the conceptual data model incorporates rules of normalization to formally manage the integrity of the data and relationships, and it is associated with the design of a solution. So if you're going to build something, say you want to order t-shirts, well, this is how are you going to provide the ability to order t-shirts? Where are we going to keep the records? Where are we going to, what APIs do we need to build? And then deeper, the physical data model will address the concerns like performance, concurrency, and security. So you get more and more refined as you move down these. This would be, say, level 1, level 2, and level 3, maybe 4, depending on how you look at it. They're developed for different purposes and may look significantly different even when depicting the same information in the same domain. So what you show to the business is not going to be what you show to the developers or what the developers help you create. The business wouldn't understand what the developers have. And to be honest, if you're talking to the executive level in business, they don't want to know all the details that the developers have to do. They just want to know, do we have something to take care of this problem? And you can show it to them. There's different modeling notations, and they're going to produce similar results. And I'm going to talk about a couple of the modeling notations down here. I want to talk about the logical and physical entity relationship diagrams, the ERDs. They would be for a relational database. So if you're not doing a relational database, you don't need those. Physical class diagrams and logical diagrams would be used to support object-oriented software development. So what you're doing, what your goal is, will help you determine what your format is. Let's see, entities and classes. In a data model, the organization keeps data on entities or classes or classes or data objects. An entity may represent something physical, such as a warehouse, something organizational, such as a sales area, or something abstract, such as a product line or an event, like an appointment. An entity contains attributions and has relationships of other entities in the model. In a class diagram, you've got entities referred to as classes. So it's the same thing, just with different terminology. A class also contains operations or functions that describe what can be done with the class, such as generating an invoice or opening a bank account. Each one will have a unique identifier that sets it apart from other instances. So you don't want them to get confused. So with those, then you go to attributes. Attributes define a particular piece of information associated with the entity. For instance, how much information could be captured in it, what's allowable values, what type of information it represents. It can be described in a data dictionary. Allowable values may be specified through business rules. So you've got data dictionary and business rules analysis as tangent techniques for this. So each of your attributes are going to have something like, what is it called? What's the values or meanings? What's the description? I've seen also what type of values can be allowed in this. What is the label on the UI? All kinds of other information that you might need. What you need to do is determine which ones you will need, and then go from there. And then your relationships. Basically, it's this. Each occurrence for this entity is related to minimum or maximum of the other entity. So I'm sorry, this is not easy. It's easier with the pictures. We'll get to that in just a minute. It basically talks about how many occurrences are allowed on each side of that relationship. And then you get to your diagrams. And ironically, BPMN is currently, I've been interviewing lately, guys, and BPMN is all I've been asked about. But in the BABOK, it talks about ERD. So this is ERD, Entity Relationship Diagram, also called crow's foot notation. These symbols here indicate quantities. This is a mini, this is, I forgot what this one means. Is this 0?
Is that the
One?
many to one, or one to many, or many to many?
Looks like many.
So this is many. Is this one?
One and only one, I believe.
One and only one. Thank you, Jim. And so you see relationships here, you see quantities here. And then we go down to cardinality. You're using, well, here is the key, isn't it? Any number 0 to many, 0 to 1, only 1, and any number from 1 to many. So we've got any number from 1 to many there, only 1. So it helps you understand the quantities as they go across. Then the class diagram, the name of the class is listed here, and then you got your attributes, and then you got your operations. And instead of crow's foot notation, it uses notation like this. It's multiplicity notation. And again, you've got your key down here. The attributes, again, listed in the box below the class, and the relationships are identified by the lines. Metadata model optionally contains metadata describing what the entities represent, when and why they were created or changed, and how they should be used, or how often they should be used, when and by whom. We'll talk about that in the examples I have also. There could be restrictions on the creation or use, as well as security, privacy, audit constraints, and specific entities on the whole or whole groups as entities. So the strengths of this can be used to define and communicate a consistent vocabulary used by domain subject matter experts and implementation subject matter experts, which means that they have had to come together and create this vocabulary before you start. Review a logical data model helps ensure that the logical design or persistent data correctly represents the business need. Provides a consistent approach to analyzing and documenting data and its relationships. Offers the flexibility of different levels of detail, which provides just enough information for the respective audiences. Don't give people more information than they need, because they'll get tired and lost and they'll stop listening. Give them what they need at the level they need it. Formal modeling of the information held by the business may expose new requirements as inconsistencies are identified. And then limitation. Following data modeling standards too rigorously may lead to models that are unfamiliar to people without the background in IT, and may extend across multiple functional areas of the organization, so beyond the business knowledge and base of the individual stakeholders. So there's a couple of other limitations, but basically you have to create data models in a way that the people that are going to be viewing them understand them. So if you use too much notation, too many codes, they're going to get lost. So you have to consider your audience. Any questions on that? Okay, let's talk about this information I have here. So, in watching this webinar by Robert Thacker, he's basically said you need to start from answering some questions. Which processes do you want to document? For instance, how to order a t-shirt on the website, how to produce a Thanksgiving meal. What do you want to document? And then how exhaustive does this need to be? Do you want to just document the most probable process or every possible variation of this process? Typically, if the variation isn't going to happen, if it's only going to happen 20% of the time, you might not need it in this. If it's going to happen 80% of the time, you might want to represent it. And then what is the long-term goal for this exercise? If you're documenting a process from the business perspective, and then you're going to be moving it all the way down into the development levels, you might want to go ahead and use something like BPMN at the beginning, but just very, very basic notation, because that way you don't have to redo it as you move it down and make it much more refined. And then who your audience is. If it's management of business users, if it's the developers creating new software or developers changing or supplementing existing software, you got to think about that. And then as you think about that, here are different levels. And I was interested in the conversation that Paula and Robert had about this. It's like, do we really need this notation, level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4? And Robert made a really good point. He said, whenever you're looking for something, if you know it's a level 3 for this level of detail, having it notated as level 3 will really help you find it instead of having to open every single file to figure out which one it is. And then from this, you can determine your rules. If it's going to stop at this level, a high-level overview of the company's business areas, you can leave it in this format. But if you know it's going to go down all the way to BPMN, you might want to start with the BPMN. And if you need, I'm also going to give you this link in the chat, BPMN Basics. Really, most things that we do, this is all we need is the event, the activity, the gateway, and the flow. Gateway is decisions. But if you want to, you can get much more detailed. And, here's a single task. Here's a multiple task. There's a book, Real Life BPM in. But this gives you all of the different symbols that you can use in BPMN. And if you have an audience that understands it and you don't, for instance, you're new to a company and that's what they use, this is a great resource. I'll drop that into the chat. So let's talk about a process map that's static. Here's a rule. We create a process map, and as soon as we finish it, it's potentially out of date because changes are made and this is still in a file. So the pros are the high level, everyone gets on the same page by looking at this. Yes, this is what we do. The cons does not show who's responsible for each step, doesn't show what applications are involved, doesn't show how long each step takes, it doesn't show how much each step costs, it doesn't show the return on value on investment, and does not require use of standardized names, rules, and symbols. I'm sure that you've seen some of these, that they have things like people's pictures on them or titles or unicorns. You look at something and you don't know what the unicorn means. Maybe it's like, this is the idea of what we want to do, but we're not really doing it, or somebody said this, but we're not really going to execute it. So Robert showed me this, and I think this is what I'm geeked out about. I'll tell you. It's SAP Signavio. I actually had to go to a pronunciation thing to figure out how to pronounce this because in some countries it's different. So you can make your standard static, but you can also use it to identify which applications you're going to use. You can also use it to identify who the people are, the groups, and this is all standardized labels in the back end. So let's say this group changes its name and now it changes on your document. You don't have to worry about going to every single document and updating this in that document. Let's scroll up here. Then you can connect this in the back end to process mine system logs and data logs and find out who did what, when, where, and why, and how much, how often. You can get customer IDs and order status shipping information. And he briefly showed how to do some of this. You go over here to the attributes and you can go down this. It's a very long, you see the slide bar, a very long list of things that you can connect it to, including execution costs, which I'm geeked out about. I'll show that to you in a minute. It shows all the related applications identified. So you can see which applications would be impacted by this project or this process. You can see the related departments identified. So if you want to know, say you're a business analyst and you want to know who you need to go to for information, you have your list of departments. And it shows related roles identified. So if this person leaves this role, you know that it's going to impact this process. Then, and he shows this over here. Let's see if I can, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. This shows how much each step costs. How much execution time for each step that you click on. And you can break it down into, here it is. So this person takes 5 minutes, this person takes 10 minutes, this person takes 15 minutes, or this group. You can identify it down to what the decisions are. In this case, if it's in stock, it's no 50%, if it yes 50%. If it's order type, it's express or standard 50% and 50%. So you can move on down into probabilities and scenarios. Here you can see that it cost per hour for this department is this much. And then move on into, let me go back to this other one. Let me see if I can get you to the right part, because he's actually changing things in the scenario and showing you. I've got to jump in here. It times out on me. We need to go to 35 minutes.
But we also your process now is
okay. Tell me if you can hear him.
right. So how many people in customer service actually do this process? Like, when are they available? And so, we might just sort of send this. I'm going to send this is my ad is sort of state, with things here. So everything's sort of documented out, and we'll just sort of play it. And it's going to say, all right, well, within that period of time, we told it how many orders we were going to get. We told it that it was going to run for 5 days. Right? And in that, so we see 125 orders came in. They kind of made it through this process. There's a split here for whether or not it's express or standard. So 56 of them went through shipped goods. Another portion of them went down here, and there was a 50-50 split again as to whether or not the item they were looking for, because we had to print it, whether or not that special print was in stock or not. And if it was, then we obviously shipped it out. But if not, we can see that there's clearly printing bottlenecks. There's QA checks and t-shirts being printed. There were 31 left at the end of our run here. There were 14 left at the end of our run there. We actually got through of the 120 something orders, 125 orders. We got 92 completed with our particular period of time. Right? So this is, we start thinking about process cost, and this is coming from the utilization of our employees. That we said how much they get paid per hour. So just to process these orders, these 92 orders, this is what the process has to cost us. Now we can go back now, because we're looking for some analysis. We're going to be doing some modeling on this. We can go back and we can say, all right, well, what would happen, hypothetically, if instead of it being, maybe we improved our stock, right? Maybe we kept 65% of things in stock versus 50% of things in stock. Or maybe we can see, obviously, we've got a huge bottleneck here with regards to our printing department, but for the resources, we've only got one person working in printing. I need to justify hiring another printing resource. I can tell my boss all day long that I need to hire somebody, but can I prove it with data, right? And that's really what this allows me the ability to do, right? So now we go back, we say we've got two resources here. We're going to save this scenario so that it's not our, we come away from our, all right, I'm going to change this back here real quick.
Okay, so what he does is he changes the number of people he has working in each department. He changes if we have more things in stock than we normally have. He changes different things, and he's able to instantly run something for, say, 5 hours and see what the difference is. Not only is he able to tell what the money difference is, but he's also able to tell what the production differences are, as well as if there are any bottlenecks. So for business architecture, this is cool. For process improvement, this is cool. For scenarios, this is cool. Yes, Bob.
Simulations do that, specifically discrete event simulations. You can also do a lot of the same work with spreadsheets. Also, like she mentioned, your guy, David Nolan, that talked about enterprise architecture. You have the business, you have the application and logic and calculation layer, and then you have the technology layer. So what you're actually doing in this case, everything she's talking about is happening at the application and logic layer. It's the middle layer. And the way that maps to the top layer is you make sure you have the right people with the right permissions and the right training and the right departments and whatever doing the work. And then you have that hosted in the technology layer on physical and virtual servers, local machines of various kinds, and using certain pieces of software. So,
Right. I just never seen the tool actually where I could plug it into my different monitoring systems and it could show me what was really happening. So
well,
I was excited to see that.
BPMN you can actually do. It's just static notation, so it shows what the tools are. He obviously has a program which operates in BPMN that also runs simulations and does calculations, which is nice.
I agree. It's nice. I want to learn more about it. If anyone knows any more about it, I would love to have an offline conversation with you so I could see what you do. It's not something I need, but you know, I'm a geek. I love it.
Well, I do the simulation, so I'd be happy to run you through it. It informs everything I've ever done. Everything I write about and talk about is doing this.
Very nice. Thank you, Bob. Okay, does anyone have any questions about the presentation? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Jim. He's going to talk about user stories, which is our last and very best technique of the year. You're on mute, sir.
Thanks, Thea. Can everyone see my screen?
We can, thank you.
Up here. Okay, so user stories, you can see I've highlighted this with a red dot because in my study guide it said user stories were really important. So the purpose of a user story is to represent a small, concise statement of functionality or quality needed to deliver value to a specific stakeholder. And in the description, it refers to a user story typically being a sentence or two that describe who has the need addressed by the story, the goal the user is trying to accomplish, and any additional information that may be critical to understanding the scope of the story. With the focus on the stakeholder value, user stories invite exploration of the requirements by promoting additional conversations with stakeholders and grouping functional requirements for delivery. The way they can be used are to capture stakeholder needs and prioritize development. They can be used in estimating and planning. They can be used to generate user acceptance tests. And this was a good learning for me because that's the stage we're in my current project, is user acceptance testing. As a metric for measuring the delivery of value. So being able to look back and say, did we deliver the value that was in this user story? As a unit for tracing related requirements. So requirements tracing can go on with user stories. As a basis for additional analysis and as a unit of project management and reporting. So how many user stories do we have? How many have we implemented? You can get all kinds of information from that list of user stories. And in a minute, I'll show you an actual user story. So let's talk about the elements of user stories for a moment. There's a title, which is optional, but it kind of helps things when you get a big pile of user stories and you want to find something you're looking for or easily organize them. Typically, it's in an active verb goal phrase, similar to the way use cases are titled. A statement of value, and this is key. There's no mandatory structure, but one of the most popular formats is who. So a user role or persona. What, a necessary action, behavior, feature, or quality, and why, the benefit or value received by the user when the story is implemented. So for example, as a who, so as an admin, I need to be able to do these things on the system so that my users will have access. And so there are other ways to make these statements of value. Another one format is given, when, and then. And then the conversation. User stories help teams to explore and understand the feature described in the story and the value it will deliver to the stakeholder. The story itself doesn't capture everything. I think that's really key. We'll go into that in a minute about usage considerations. It doesn't capture everything there is to know about the stakeholder need, and the information in the story is supplemented by further modeling as the story is delivered. And finally, acceptance criteria. And I underlined this in my copy of the BABOK. There is a link to page 217 about acceptance and evaluation criteria. The user story may be supported through the development of a detailed acceptance criteria, which defines the boundaries of a user story and helps the team to understand what the solution needs to provide in order to deliver value for the stakeholders. Acceptance criteria may be supplemented with other analysis models as needed. In some ways, this reminds me of a saying that someone that I worked with used to say, which was write tests first. So writing testable requirements means you have to have an acceptance criteria. So this can help the user story. And we'll go into that a little bit in a moment when I show you an example of a user story. Usage considerations. Strengths, there are many strengths on this, easily understandable by stakeholders, can be developed through a variety of elicitation techniques, focuses on value to stakeholders. It creates a shared understanding of the business domain, and it's enhanced through collaboration on defining and exploring user stories. It's tied to small, implementable, and testable slices of functionality, which facilitates rapid delivery and frequent customer feedback. So it is really listening to the users, getting them to tell their stories. Some people can be a little bit afraid to create requirements because they see them as static, but these are a little friendlier, I think, because really kind of encapsulate an activity that a user needs to do their jobs or to get value or create value. Limitations, and you'll see this in a moment when I show you the list of user stories I have. In general, user stories are intended as a tool for short-term capture and prioritization of requirements and not for long-term knowledge retention or to provide a detailed analysis. Neglecting this principle can lead to the following issues. This conversational approach can challenge the team since they do not have all the answers and detailed specifications up front. It requires context and visibility. The team can lose sight of the big picture if the stories are not traced back through validation or supplemented with higher level analysis and visual artifacts. How many of you as business analysts have created, whether it's user stories or a list of functional requirements, and your users just gave them to you and you wrote them all down, and you realize later that if you just listed those, you wouldn't know if you had gaps between them or which ones were interrelated to the, for instance, the workflow or the process flow. So having a context around user stories is very important because then you can start to see the gaps you might have between the stories and the relationships and the elaboration that you need to do with the stories. They may not provide enough documentation to meet the need for governance, a baseline for future work, or stakeholder expectations. Additional documentation may be required, so batteries not included. So for that, are there any questions about what I've read to you in the BABOK before I just show you some actual user stories? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and show you the actual user stories, and then I'm going to show you a snippet of a really cool website that Thea shared the other day, and I've been kind of mining that website for information. So this was an actual project that recently went live where I work, and the user story here, it has a short description or title. In here, this is called branding. Configure the corporate company record. So here's the story or requirement. As a user of the system, I want the company logo, browser tab icon, favicon, and banner text to reflect my company, so users see the corporate theme when accessing the instance. This may not be worded in terms of direct value, but the sort of implied value and the so that is really brand identification for users that are using the system. And finally, there's an acceptance criteria here. I know this is complete when the system configuration settings have been saved for each instance. Production displays the company logo, banner, and browser text, company color. So you can see this is very specific. It says, we will judge this story correct and complete when it meets this very specific acceptance criteria. And so having those pieces of information can tell us a lot in a very encapsulated way. There were more than 500 user stories that were supplied up front by this vendor when we started the project. So they actually came to us with their own software and their own home-baked user stories that we could customize for ourselves and say, is that user story true? So we weren't starting from scratch with a blank canvas. And that really helped us to understand the different roles that were available and what those roles do in the out-of-the-box system and how we could customize them to our flavor of the system. So spreadsheets were created with literally hundreds of these stories. They were broken up. They were given different owners. They were groomed and approved. And in doing so, they were able to implement the system with some pretty good knowledge of what the user stories that the user stories provided around value and around functionality. So I'm going to show you a website now. And this is kind of a learning experience for me. I'm no user story expert. I'm no Agile expert. But this is a pretty good guide on Agile development and use cases versus user stories. I'll put this in the chat. One moment. There we go. So navigating Agile development, use cases versus user stories. And basically this article talks about use cases and user stories have their own place and they have a relationship. So when it comes to use cases, the strengths are really around the macro view, seeing the whole picture, seeing how things integrate with users. And with user stories, let's see, hang on a moment. So in this use case, it describes what the use case is, the actor, the trigger, the main flow, the alternative flow, and they excel at capturing system behavior from a macro perspective. They're great for understanding overall functionality of the system. However, the devil's often in the details. So let's go to user stories. User stories, on the other hand, take this kind of format: who, what, why, role, action, benefit, and they get down into, as you saw in those details, a lot more detail about all of the things that a user can do. And in this article, they start talking about mapping use case models to user story maps and having various levels within those maps and going to a sprint backlog. This I don't fully understand, but it's really interesting to me to think about the world in terms of, I've done use cases before. I've seen user stories before, but they, have a way to map them from use case models to user stories, user tasks, and releases, and working with a sprint backlog. So they can interrelate and can be useful and give you more of a context for the stories than just these, spreadsheets of stories that are captured. I thought that was pretty cool. Have others that are either certified or have more experience than I do, have experience that you'd like to share around user stories?
I can talk all day about things like this, and actually would like to share a link, but before I jump into that, I'd like to hear what anyone else has to say.
Jim, I just feel for you on the spreadsheet part. We use ADO and Jira, and it just helps this whole organization, your acceptance criteria and your requirements, just helps manage it. Very, very nice.
We're headed that way.
Good. The spreadsheet, how do you handle that? I mean, do you put it out on Teams and manage who can do what? And
we put it out on SharePoint. We had assigned specific leads to take over specific areas of the stories and get with their stakeholders to inform those stories. The other thing that we're pretty, that's pretty much a standard here is to use ALM, the HP ALM software for testing. So we turn those user stories into functional requirements and into a format that we could pull the spreadsheet into ALM and have formal requirements. And the way they were written with their acceptance criteria, they made it very easy to then create tests and test scripts from those user stories. So it became kind of a launch into the application lifecycle management software. We could run tests against each of them and log our defects accordingly. So one of the things I'm working on right now is putting together, because we kind of struggle with this in our IT organization, is putting together what are the minimum sets of deliverables that you need for a particular project. And we do all kinds of projects, facilities projects where we actually build out part of the hospital and put in devices in those areas. So there are device maps and all kinds of workflows and process flows, integration projects where we integrate all of our systems. So that's part of what I'm working on, and it would be great to hear back from people around how they do that in their organization. How do you set standards for what are the minimum things that you need to create in order to say that you've tested a system, that you've got a complete and working system and that meets regulations without overdoing it, without saying you have to do everything in the BABOK for this project.
Right.
You're basically talking about a full life cycle projects, and also marching through all the various phases I was described. And then you're talking about identifying requirements and making sure you do all the work associated with that. And you're also, and I need to remember this, I cannot remember. Oh, doing requirements traceability, and that's very hard. So usually when you're thinking in terms of user stories, that's at the requirements level, but that is different than having tasks to do. So a lot of tracking software like Jira, it's really good for assigning tasks to people and have them follow that through, and you can merge them across, okay, I've been assigned in, or the task is created, it's assigned to somebody, they're working on it, they get it done, and then they send it for approval or testing, and there's maybe a feedback loop in that. But that's different than requirements traceability. So if you remember, traceability is done in two ways. It's through its life cycle, right? And it's also in a hierarchy relating all the parts to the whole. So in the link that I shared, I do a very brief introduction, and I would ask you to look at these slides. So it's in webinar series number 10 out of 14 that I gave another group. So if you look at the slides, it talks about how to do my basic framework, and it actually shows you how to think about the tasks you do in every phase and how to track them in every phase, but also how to link them across all the phases of the life cycle, right? So first you're defining the problem, then you're figuring out what's going on now through a process of discovery and data collection. Then you're coming up with requirements. Then you do design, which has to address all the requirements. Then you do implementation of all the design elements. and then you do testing of all the implemented elements. And you can there's a lot of ways you can do things in different orders. You can do it agile, so different people are in different parts of that process all the time. But that is this particular presentation for me was kind of a breakthrough for me conceptually, because I figured out the difference of trying to use things like Jira for just user stories, but it's really a task thing, and tracking elements all the way through their life cycle, doing requirements traceability, that's very hard, actually, and it can be very expensive, and it's really hard to keep it all straight. The other thing I figured out in that presentation was how to map the kind of tracking through all the phases. So I showed that numerous diagrams, but also how to map the hierarchical mapping on it, and show that it really maps into kind of at right angles the through the phase. So you're ultimately doing all the same stuff. So I invite you to take a look at what I produce there. I will spend whatever time you want to help you clear it up, including writing more, doing more webinars, whatever it takes. So I know it's probably a lot of stuff to throw at you, but what you're getting at here is the essential oomph of business analysis, and trying to keep it all straight, and why it can be difficult.
That's true. Jim, I think you did a fantastic job. The only thing that I would ask in response to your question of how do you determine what the minimum requirements are for each of those categories is create classes of stories. If you have construction, that's going to be very different than if you're doing marketing for e-commerce. One thing I would suggest is, if you have the story that you gave us was an example where you needed to have a logo shown in specific places. Whenever the developers are putting the logo on those specific places, if they're saying, here's the address of the first one, here's the address of the second one, here's the address of the third one, and somewhere in the story, I'm sure you gave them a link to the logo in the style book. So whenever it gets to QA, they get to go to the addresses that the developers gave, so they don't have to try to figure out, it says all instances, what does that mean? Where is it at? So it turns into literally QA can say, yes, it's there, yes, it matches, or no, it doesn't.
That's why you talk to each other and do feedback in every phase.
But if you keep it all, say, once you get into Jira or Rally, if you keep all the documentation in that story, that way, whenever someone wants to do a change to it in the future, they've got the list. You know, it's like, we're updating the logo. Where is it? We have the logo. So just go back and look at it in Jira or Rally. One note about Jira and Rally, for those of you who haven't used it, who are planning on using it in the future, one thing that I found is you can organize stories by either features or epics, depending on which of the tools you use. It's the same thing. It's basically a bucket. So if you say, for the next release, we have these 3 different things we want to release, 3 different buckets, say, import all of the Salesforce contacts. That's going to be the bucket. So the stories in it are going to talk about the different steps in importing it. Every user story needs to be something you can achieve within a single sprint, by the whole team. That means from very beginning of starting to work through testing, has to be within a single sprint. So be sure your stories are that size or a little bit smaller. And that way, whenever you get a story finished, you know that you can start another story if you want to, but one story can go in a sprint. That way you can kind of say, okay, this sprint, this sprint, this sprint, we know how long it's taken us in the first 3 sprints. We think we can get it done by the 8th sprint. Then we can schedule our release. So also in Jira and Rally, if you just name something, if you just name a user story, the action that you want to happen, you don't see a continuity of all of these are within the same feature or epic, because you have to kind of drill down to see, oh, which feature is that one in. But if in the naming convention, if you put the feature name hyphen and the story, what the story goal is there, you can see it all together and you can group them easily whenever you do queries. They're in alphabetical order. I have gone so far as to put feature 1, 2, 3 for the one in the order that we have to do them. That way I can say, we're working on 4 and we haven't finished 3. Is that okay? You know, but that way it allows you to better organize. It allows you to better find things, and it allows you to better look at, to say, oh, it's in that feature. Let's go see if there's anything else somebody's added to the feature.
I talk about all that in the materials I linked.
Very good. Thank you, Bob. Okay,
All right,
we have
guys.
4 minutes left.
I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
That's okay.
I did want to let people know, yes, we're going on vacation. We'll be back in January, beginning of the year. While we're gone, please join the meetup group. We have partnered with Apex Systems, who has a lot of free training. And I mean official free training. These are good for PDUs and CDUs. So if you were doing your PMP or if you're doing your IIBA, these classes are good for all of that. And they are listed in our meetup. And like I said, we partnered with them. They're free. You register for free and you can watch them, or not watch them. They're live events. So, you know, we've got plenty of stuff to keep you busy while we're away, basically. So have fun. Have a great Thanksgiving. And Thea, off to you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, Jim, thank you. Bob, thank you for your training today and your input. We are going to create a Google Calendar of events coming up that is any event that will benefit a business analyst. And so if you can find it online, something that will benefit a business analyst, let us know if it has a date and time. We're also going to create a list of links that we feel are valuable based upon topic. And so we're going to identify when we added the link so we can be sure they don't get stale. And anything, any training you can find. I have found so many free trainings lately, things for AI, things for database, things for all kinds of stuff. So we're going to work on that. If you have things, send them to me on LinkedIn and I will add them and I will publicize it for the benefit of everyone. It's not just limited to our organization, but of course, being members of this organization, you're going to know exactly where it's at because we're going to talk about it every week when we come back. Our very first meeting when we come back, our illustrious president is going to do a presentation on what he does in his data. He already said he would. He's just forgotten by now.
No,
but
I haven't forgotten.
We want to understand better what you do, Cliff, because the things that you
So do
we're
I.
gonna run into. we're gonna run into it in one of our jobs or in one of our opportunities. And it's going to allow us to have some knowledge so that whenever somebody says, we don't know how to do this, we're going to go, wait, Cliff talked about that. And so that's going to be our first one. We don't know what the second one's going to be. We're going to get that done, worked on while we're on break. But come back and see us the very first Thursday in January. We're going to listen to Cliff talk about what he does, and we're going to ask him lots of questions. So we want your participation, we want your engagement, and we want you to show up. Y'all have a great holiday season. God bless you. See you in January. Bye.
Well, I'll see you guys next year.
Yep. See you next year.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Happy holiday. Happy
Happy
Thanksgiving.
holiday, baby.
Yes.
Bye, Sherry.
Bye-bye.